Now, this ether model of the universe is beautifully simple, and that's what makes it so powerful, and that's what means it must be closer to the truth. Simplicity is divinity. Now, what it means is this universe is made of one substance, only one thing, one substance, and that we're going to call ether. But we can have many names for it. We could also call this consciousness, spirit. We could also call this inertia, which means rest, and it also means infinite energy, potential energy, because it's an abstract thing. So we have to describe it in many different ways, but it is still only one thing. And this one substance, ether, must be able to explain all phenomena. Everything in the universe is made of this one substance. The soul, the spirit, and the body, the material world, all must be made of this one ether. And because there's only one substance, there must be only one force. There's only one force in the universe. Has to be. And this one force appears because there are different pressures in the ether, different densities. Again, I mean it in an abstract way. I could say density, I could say energy, I could say intensity, pressure. But let's call it density, let's call it pressure. If I say pressure, we can visualize that. So we will have areas of high pressure and areas of low pressure. And that creates the force. High pressure wants to move towards low pressure because it wants to balance itself out. The infinite total ether is balance, it's rest, it's inertia. It must be, because it's infinite. At the infinite point, everything is there, everything must be at balance. But there's also nothing there. You see, nothing is at the infinitesimal, everything is at the infinite, but both are the same. However, you could say at the infinitesimal, we're moving towards infinite pressure, and at the infinite, we're moving towards zero pressure. So we've got a dramatic difference in pressure between the infinitesimal and the infinite. And in fact, what we have is an infinite potential energy, an infinite force. That infinite high pressure wants to go to the infinite low pressure. So the universe will be expanding from this point of super high pressure, going towards infinite low pressure. And that is consciousness. Consciousness is a point, a zero point, coming from outside dimensions, an infinitesimal point manifesting into reality, expanding high pressure, expanding out into low pressure. So that is the manifestation of the fundamental force, but it's infinite. That's why we call it the ether, and we can also call it inertia, infinite potential energy. But now inside this infinite bubble, we have all different variations of this pressure. They are limited variations. So you could have an area of high pressure and an area of low pressure. Then the area of high pressure will move towards the area of low pressure. And in fact, they will both move. They will move together towards the closest point of balance. Everything is trying to just balance itself out. High pressure and low pressure redistributing itself inside this fluid. Again, you could visualize it like this. We are all underwater. The underlying nature of the universe is fluid. We're underwater, but it's three-dimensional fluid spreading out. There's no surface to the water. Everything is underwater. And underwater, you've got different pressures. high pressure area of water, low pressure area of water, and the pressure is redistributing itself underwater. That's the universe. And you could look at it like this. Within the universe, you can have an area of high pressure and an area of low pressure, and they're held in suspension. They're locked in place. So now what you have is a force created, a potential energy. They want to pull together, but they can't. It's just a static potential. So this is a limited potential energy, but if they're allowed to move, if they're allowed to release, they would come together, and in the process of releasing that potential, we would have something called energy. So there's only one force. This one force creates a static potential, and the release of that static potential creates the one energy. So we could say that manifest energy is simply the movement of pressure within the ether. But the ether has got this infinite potential. So it's infinite potential energy. But what we see within that, inside that, is little areas of limited potential. And we have a variation of this pressure. Now this is where it gets interesting. This is where we're going to talk about matter, physical energy. How does this become manifest? Now I'm saying they're different densities. Density means pressure of this ether. And each density would have a different sort of effect. Now, the easiest way we can look at this is using water as an analogy, but it's not quite a perfect analogy. So we know that there are three states of matter, or three basic states of matter. We have solid, liquid, and gas. And these actually are three states of energy. We know that because cold water becomes ice. That's low energy, it's cold. Then you've got medium energy, which is water. Water is a bit warmer, so it's got more energy. And then you've got steam, water vapor. That's hotter, so that has more energy. So these three states of matter are based on three states of energy. A state of energy means a pressure or a density of the ether. So look at it this way. High pressure, high density ether means high energy. Low pressure, low density ether means low energy. So if you say low energy is ice, higher energy is water, higher energy is gas, steam. But now we know we can go further. Even higher energy is plasma. So this is the fourth state of matter. Now, this is where it gets interesting. I would say there are actually 5 states of matter. And the 5th state of matter is crystal. See, now again, we've got to forget about water because water is only an analogy. 5 states of matter. You're going to have a plasma, highest energy. Then you're going to have a gas, lower energy. Then you're going to have a liquid, lower energy. Then you're going to have a solid, lower energy. But there's an even lower energy, which is crystal. See, a solid is just amorphous, random atoms clumped together. But a crystal is an even lower energy state because the atoms are locked in their most efficient position, geometrically. It's the lowest state of energy. They've managed to organize themselves in just the optimum position for lowest energy, but they are locked in place now. Again, it's the most efficient structure for lowest entropy. So the lowest energy state is crystal. But this is confusing again. This is confusing because We have not created the atom yet. Now, let's look at this from the perspective of ether. Let's go the other way round. So the ether, pure fluid ether, this is consciousness. So consciousness, spirit, or manifests itself in its lowest density, lowest energy. It's just appearing. And low density, low energy ether, we can call the soul, consciousness, the mind. We can say it is thought energy. Lowest density ether is thought energy. Now, thought energy, okay, that's very diffuse. Now, the thought energy, it might converge, start to get denser. So the next level of density, more power from the ether, is feelings, emotions, emotional energy. Emotional energy, you can think of that as passion. Passionate thinking has got more power, more intensity. So I'm just thinking, daydreaming about nothing. But if I want to survive, I've really got to think hard. I'm in a dangerous position. That thinking becomes emotional, more powerful. So more dense ether is emotion, feeling. Now that ether gets even more dense, more pressure. The next level, okay, here it gets difficult. The next level density of ether after feeling is light. Light. Now light is physically manifest. Again, this is a totally new model of the universe. Forget everything you know already. Empty your mind. We've been told about light. Light is a particle, light is a wave, this, that. No, forget everything. None of that. We're starting all over again. You don't know what light is, I'm telling you. More intense, more pressure feeling becomes light. So light now spreads out. We can see that. Here is light. But light gets more and more pressure, more and more density in light. So as light increases in density, increases in pressure, it becomes electricity. Now again, we don't know what electricity is. We're starting all over again. I'm telling you what electricity is. I'm defining it for you. Electricity is high density light, high pressure light. Now, so we know electricity, it runs through wires. We can see it in lightning. Lightning is electricity discharged. But if electricity, higher density, higher pressure electricity will become a plasma. A plasma. Now there is lightning. Lightning is a plasma, in fact, in the sky, in the weather. Again, I'm telling you, forget about what you know. I'm telling you what a plasma is. High pressure electricity will be a plasma. But it's all still the ether, more and more intense, pressurized ether. So now we've got a plasma. So a plasma is now super high pressure ether. Now inside a plasma, very, very high pressure. We're going to super high pressure now. Inside a plasma, you will have formation of a bubble. And you can get these formations of bubbles everywhere. So you can get a bubble of electricity. You can get a bubble of light. You could get a bubble of emotion. You can get a bubble of thought. Bubbles can form everywhere in the ether because the ether is moving, spirals. But now here's the important bubble to understand. Inside a plasma, this is highest pressure ether now. We're moving towards infinite density, infinite pressure. But at that point of infinite collapse, you can have a bubble created. That bubble is a bubble of plasma. So you imagine it's trying to collapse and it's also expanding. It's a balance of collapsing and expanding, and then it's locked into a bubble. But it's a bubble of plasma. That we can call an atom. Well, that is where material substance is created. So now we've got atoms. And it's locked in the plasma. So now it gets interesting. In a plasma, now it starts to lose energy. A plasma is still just open. It's diffusing, spreading out. It's energy being discharged. It's force releasing itself. So as the plasma is dissipating, cooling down, you still have these bubbles remaining. Some of the plasma is locked now, trapped in a bubble. Now you have an atom. And this is super high energy plasma. We need to see this in cosmology, in a black hole. A black hole is the most powerful cosmological entity. It's a giant vortex of ether, high pressure being sucked in, super high pressures being created. Everything gets sucked in, but also it's a balance. It's exploding outwards. And plasma is exploding out of a black hole. They call it galactic jets or astrophysical jets. But then from this plasma, as it cools down, we get hydrogen gas. That's the fundamental atom. So from a pure plasma, highest pressure ether, you've got a bubble of hydrogen. There's a particular bubble that can be created. And again, why this bubble, how these bubbles are particular, is to do with mathematics. And I have to go into the details about that. But just for now, you can get the picture. So now we've got these atoms, but the rest of the plasma is cooling down, spreading out. The pressure is releasing, spreading out off to infinity. But you've got some bubbles left. So now you're going the other way. Now from a plasma, you've got a gas, hydrogen gas spreading out. And as that gas cools down, you create a liquid. So now we can use the analogy of water. Steam becomes water, a liquid. Now if the liquid cools down, you've got a solid. But if the solid cools down in just the right way, you can have a crystal. And you see, it's interesting, if you've got a solid and you want to create a crystal, you have to melt that solid. You have to melt it. You have to apply energy to it, heat up the solid. So you're turning the solid into a liquid, hold it under pressure and a certain position so that now that liquid can transform, the atoms can find their best alignment to create a crystal. Then when it cools down, the atoms are locked because they're in their position of lowest energy, the most efficient position. They're already there. They're not going to move anymore. Now as it cools down, they stay there because they are held in suspension at the point of lowest energy, lowest or maximum entropy. That's why they stay there. That's why a crystal is the most stable form of matter. It's lowest energy. It can't go any lower because the plasma that makes up the atoms is locked. It's trapped in a bubble, and those bubbles are now all locked together in their lowest point of balance, and that is mathematical geometrical. So mathematics governs the creation of crystal. Now remember, once you have an atom, it's a sphere, it's geometry. Now we're talking mathematics. But you'll have different bubbles creating different atoms. And again, you can have different bubbles within different densities. Remember, the soul is a bubble. a bubble in the thought energy, a bubble in the emotional energy, a bubble of consciousness. The bubble of consciousness condenses and creates light. I, the soul, and quite literally creating light. But it's very low density. Remember, it's a pure fluid change of densities. You see, light starts off very low energy, radio waves. So you can look at it like this. Emotions start to create radio waves. Again, I'm talking about waves. It's pressure waves. Pressure in the ether. Density of the ether. But radio waves increase and increase in pressure. They become light, visible light. But it starts off with red light. Then it will go up to violet light, more pressure. It go up to white light, more pressure. Then it goes up, more pressure, starting to turn into electricity. And again, electricity behaves like a fluid. Light. Okay, let's talk about it this way. Well, I've said that light becomes electricity, becomes plasma. Again, modern science will not quite understand this. You have to start all over again and gradually build up. It will eventually blend together with modern science. I will be able to explain it. But for now, you just got to just open your mind and think about it in a new way. Look at it like this. We have the analogy of water. So ice is matter. Water is electricity. And steam is light. Or it's rather the other way. We have plasma, which creates atoms. So that is ice. Then you have electricity, which is water, and we have light, which is steam. So light behaves in a slightly different way to electricity, and plasma behaves in a slightly different way to electricity. They all behave slightly differently, but plasma has the ability to create atoms. So plasma, you can look at it like this. Plasma, again, is crystallizing. So crystallized plasma creates atoms. Then atoms create all different material substances, all different effects. You've then got chemistry, all that, but chemistry is still now different atoms, different bubbles interacting together with pure fluid ether, different densities. They interact with light, interact with electricity. Electricity is like water, fluid. Light is like steam. But these are all different pressure densities of the ether moving around. But now we've got bubbles. We've got bubbles. And the way life works is very complicated. A living body. So this living body is made of atoms, but every single atom in the periodic table is in the body. All the different energies are in the body. We've got solid, liquid and gas within the body. We've also got plasma. Again, we can have microscopic plasma. Tiny little bubbles of plasma. And I don't mean atoms, I mean still fluid plasma. All of this is fluid, but we've got bubbles within the fluid. That's material substance. So you can see it's a mirror world. As above, so below. In this physical world, this substance looks like the solid reality. But from the energy world, it's pure fluid. We're underwater. We're underwater. And these solid objects are bubbles in the water. It's the other way round. These bubbles are the empty space. We're in the field space. As above, so below. You can look at it another way, and you can see that's why it works in reverse. You see, low pressure ether, thought energy, affects crystal, because crystal is actually low energy ether. This is not high energy. It's high energy because it's made of atoms. If you could release the atoms, there's masses of energy in there. But let's assume the atoms are now fixed and they're locked in their lowest energy. So this crystal is very low density ether. And my thought energy is very low density ether. So it can interact with this crystal. Do you see? My feelings, emotional energy is more powerful, more dense. So that's moving up towards, that's moving up towards light. It's not quite light, it's like radio waves, invisible light. Heat is low frequency light, they say. Infrared radiation, that's light. Emotions make you hot or cold. Emotional energy is heat, light. You see? But if you could focus the emotional energy more and more, you might get to higher density light until you could emit some light. You know, if you could detect it, you'd actually, well, you would. Infrared radiation is coming up. But that's why they would say, see halos, for example. They used to say advanced masters. They like emitting light. You have a light body. That's more intense. Intense thought energy, intense emotional energy becomes light energy. And then that becomes even more intense, becomes electricity. Electricity now is power for the body. And I'm going to talk more about this again in time. But that again, more intense electricity is plasma. That's imploding inwards. And now you're creating a very powerful body. So you're creating a material body. But it's complicated. This material body is constructed with all different atoms, biological materials. Now life is very, very complicated. And it means there is a process of mathematics going on. We're now talking about complex systems. A crystal is low complexity. This living body is high complexity. So it's very difficult to, I've got to explain this again on another level. But you can see the basic level of ether. We're all underwater in this fluid energy. And we control it with consciousness and feeling and movement. That's how it works. So thank you so much for listening. I do hope this made sense. Please do leave me any questions or comments. And I hope to see you and look forward to seeing you in any of these other videos here.